Good evening, everyone. Tonight's shiur is always Leilu Nishmat Avi Mori Dov Ber Meir Ben Reuven Halevi Imi Maroti Rachel Bat Harav Michael. I want to wish everybody a Chodesh Tov. And this Shabbat we will have the privilege of reading the parsha of Korach, which talks about Korach, interestingly enough. And we're going to really focus primarily on the beginning of the parsha. So I'm going to bring up the sources and we will get started. So the parsha begins with a very, very interesting pasuk, and I'm going to really just go through the first couple of psukim here because they really highlight what the problem with the first pasuk is. The word parsha begins with Vayikach Korach. Now the word Vayikach means and he took. It's singular, third person. Korach took. And who is Korach? Korach is the son of Yitzhar ben Kat ben Levi, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahat, the son of Levi. Vidatan v'Aviram and Datan and Aviram b'nei Eliav, the sons of Eliav, V'on ben Pelet and On, the son of Pelet, all b'nei Ruvain. So the interesting here is Vayikach is in the singular. We have a listing of 4 people, and the question is, what did they take? It doesn't say who took what, or just as and somebody took something. And then interestingly enough, it then switches for the rest of the 3 psukim that deal with this group. It says Vayakumu, and they stood before Moshe. Vayikalu, they congregated on Moshe. Vayomru alehem, and they spoke to them. So the questions that we have to understand is, firstly, who took, and why is it in the singular, and what did they take? And that's what we're going to primarily focus on for the next period of time. So we're going to start not with Rashi, but with his grandson Rashbam, who says that the word Vayikach Korach clearly is in the singular. That means Korach is the one who is doing the taking. But what is he taking? And it doesn't say what he is taking. There's no object of what he is taking. So Rashbam tells us, Kemo Vayikach Avram et Sarai Ishto v'et Lot ben Achiv. We have a verse where it says that Avram, when he traveled from Haran to go to Eretz Yisrael, he takes Sarah, his wife, and Lot. So here too, Avkan, Vayikach Korach. What does it mean, Vayikach Korach? That Korach takes Datan v'Aviram, and Datan and Aviram seem to be with him, although Korach is the primary driver. It seems that Datan and Aviram, at least according to Rashbam's way of looking at it, join with him. And what are they taking? They're taking Anashim Harbe. They're taking all of these people that we see in verse 2 of Anashim B'nei Yisrael Chamishim U'Matayim, these 250 people who the pasuk talks about in verse 2. That's what they took. They took 250 people. Ad shekamu imoyam lifnei Moshe, until they arose before them, as the pasuk says, before Moshe. And when they got there, it found out that there were Chamishim U'Matayim. There were 250 people. So Korach, according to Rashbam, is taking people. He is gathering together people and taking them with him where he is going. Just like Avram, when he travels, is taking people with him. That's the way Rashbam says the word Vayikach works. Sforno also has a very similar interpretation. It says Vayikach Korach shiur hakatuv v'sidro. You have to look through the whole sequence of the psukim and put it in the proper order, because the Torah is writing this in a slightly incorrect order, or a not clearly understood order. Ki'ilu Omar, it's as if the pasuk says Vayikach Korach v'Datan v'Aviram v'On ben Pelet. If it's as if it said Korach, Datan, Aviram, and On took Chamishim U'Matayim Nesiyei Edah. They took these 250 men who are the leaders of the congregation. Vayakumu lifnei Moshe, and they arose before Moshe, and then together Anashim B'nei Yisrael, together with Moshe and the rest of Am Yisrael. So he says that the Chamishim U'Matayim Nesiyei Edah are who they are taking. So he's very similar to Rashbam in that Korach is basically taking people and approaching Moshe and Aaron with his complaint, with his speech. That's a Canaan. Very simply says, Vayikach Korach, he quotes the Gemara in Chelek, the Gemara in Sanhedrin that says, Vayikach Amar Rish Lakish tells us that what does it mean, Vayikach? What did Korach take? Shalokach mekach ra liatzmo. He took, to makach also means in specifically even much more so in Talmudic Hebrew. Vayikach means to take something to purchase something, to get involved in a transaction. And Rish Lakish says that what Korach Take, he took a bad deal. Basically, he got himself involved in a poor transaction that he should not have gotten involved in, and that's what it says by Yikach, that he looked to buy something or to get something or to achieve something, and he didn't quite work out the way he had hoped it would. Okay, now onkelos, which is the Aramaic translation, tells us the word vayikach normally is, there are different ways that it's translated, but here onkelos has a completely different translation than he normally does for to take, but it's v'it palig, which literally means the root of the word palig is palig, which means to split, to divide, which literally means v'it palig, that Korach divided himself, and together with Datan and Aviram and On and Pelet, he divided himself. Rashi is going to comment on what he thinks onkelos means by this term of v'it palig, to separate, to split, into divide off into a separate group. And we're going to go, of course, now to Rashi. Okay, so Rashi, based again on onkelos, says the following: Lakach, what did Korach take? Lakach et atzmo. He took himself. Litzad echad, to one side. In other words, he took himself, separated himself from the entire congregation, put himself on one side. Nechlak mitoch ha'eda, to separate himself from the rest of the congregation. Orer alakuna. His complaint was that Aaron had been appointed Kohen Gadol. Korach said, I want to be Kohen Gadol, or I want to be a Kohen. In other words, his complaint is that he was not appointed to be a Kohen. At least that's what Rashi seems to imply, although Rashi is then going to quote the Midrash. The Zehu, Shetirgem onkelos, and that's what onkelos meant when he said v'it paleg, means he divided himself. Nechlak mishar ha'eda lachzik b'machloket. He separated himself from the rest of the congregation to strengthen himself in separating, in dividing, in creating strife, creating problems. And he quotes similarly a pasuk in Iyov Ma'i Kachacha Litcha. When your heart takes you, in other words, when you're basically saying that his heart took him, he gave himself this advice to do something. What does that mean? Lokach otcha, that your heart takes you, laflikcha mishar b'nei adam. Your heart takes you in the direction that you want to go, from where you want to go, regardless of anybody else. Once your heart decides to take you somewhere, you no longer are willing to listen to other people's advice. You now have separated, you've decided on your course, and you're going on your way, whether it agrees with everybody or it doesn't agree with anybody. Davar acher. Now then Rashi, after quoting this interpretation, says a different interpretation. Vayikach Korach. What does Vayikach mean? Mashach Roshei Sanhedrot Shebahem Bitvarim. Vayikach here means that he took people through the power of persuasion. He convinced people to come. So he took them by speaking to them and persuading them. And who did he take? He took the heads of the congregation. But again, Bitvarim is the key word here, is he took them through words, through convincing them. As we have a similar usage of the word Vayikach, similarly we have Shemar Kach et Aharon, when Hashem tells Moshe that Aaron is going to have to go up to Har and die. He says Kach et Aharon, take Aaron. Why? Because Moshe had to convince him to go, because he didn't necessarily want to go. Or at least that seems to be the implication, that Moshe had to convince him to go. And we have other places where similar phraseology occurs, as in Hosea and the Navi in the Haftorah of Shabbat Shuvah, Chui machem dvarim, take for yourself words. In other words, using words, convince yourself that something is true. Rashi continues, by the way, it's very interesting because it doesn't introduce just Korach. It introduces Korach through his genealogy. It says who he was. He's the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahas, the son of Levi. Now, if we've studied parshat Va'era, we already knew that Korach was the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahat, the son of Levi. So we're going to try to figure out Rashi's going to say, why do we trace this genealogy below? He's given Yaakov, but it doesn't trace his genealogy back to Yaakov Avinu. Shebikesh rachamim al atzmo, because Yaakov Avinu asked Hashem to have mercy on him. Shelo yizkar shmo al machlokotam. That when Am Yisrael would gather to quarrel, Yaakov doesn't want his name to be remembered. So ordinarily we would have expected the genealogy to continue to Yaakov. It doesn't, because Yaakov specifically asked Hashem not to include him. Shenemar we call lam al techad kivodi. When they, Yaakov, in his blessing to Shimon and Levi, or his last message to Shimon and Levi, says, Ubikalam, when they congregate together, don't include my honor. Don't worry about my honor. So in other words, Rashi seems to imply that Yaakov should have been mentioned, but he's not mentioned. However, Rashi does say, Korach, when does Korach get his genealogy traced all the way back to Yaakov Avinu? In the book of Divrei Hayamim, the book of Chronicles, when Korach's descendants are appointed to be the Levium in the choir, Shenemar, there it says, Ben Avi Asaf, Ben Korach, Ben Yitzhak, Ben Kat, Ben Levi, Ben Yisrael. There it traces his genealogy back through Korach all the way to Yaakov Avinu. So again, interesting comment by Rashi that should have said Ben Yaakov or Ben Yisrael, but it doesn't, and it reserves that for a different place in Tanakh. The Datan va'Aviram. Who are Datan and Aviram, and why do they join? If Korach is complaining that he wasn't chosen Kohen, why are Datan and Aviram getting involved in this whole undertaking? Rashi tries to understand, and he quotes the Midrashim. Why? Bishvil shayashevet Ruvain sharui b'chaniyatam teimana. On the south side of the Mishkan, where the Kahat family lived once the camp is established. If we go back to Parshat Parshat Bamidbar, we find that the tribe of Levi is in the south of the Mishkan and is Sheken Likatu Banav Achonim Teimana. Similarly, the family of Kahat, from whom Korach comes, also were to the south of the Mishkan. So they were Reuven, and the families of Reuven and the families of Gad were neighbors. Nishtatvim Korach Machlukoto. So since they lived nearby, they joined him in his controversy. And Rashi quotes from there the famous Medrash, Oila Rasha, Oili Shcheno. Woe to the wicked and woe to the neighbor of the wicked, because all too often you will get drawn in and end up in trouble. Now Rashi wants to go further. He's going to go back a step. So Mara Korach Lachaloki Moshe. What was the entire source of Korach's difference with Moshe? Nitkana al Nisiuto Shel Elitzaphan ben Uziel. He was jealous that Elitzaphan ben Uziel was appointed to some office. Shebinu Moshe Nasi al b'nei Kahat al pi hadibur. Hashem commands Moshe to appoint Elitzaphan, the son of Uziel, who is Korach's younger cousin, to be the head of the Kahat family. And Korach is upset. Amar Korach said to himself, Achi Abba, my father's brothers were Abba. There were 4 brothers in the family of Korach's father. Korach's father is Korach ben Yitzhar. Yitzhar had 3 brothers. There were 4 brothers. Shenemar of Nekad, Amram, Yitzhar, Hebron, and Uziel were the 4 sons of Kahat. Amram Habafar, Amram, who was the firstborn, not Mushnei Banav Gidola. His 2 sons got the highest paying job, got the top jobs. Echad Melech, Echad Kohen Gadol. One became the king of Am Yisrael, and one became the Kohen Gadol. That's Moshe and Aaron, of course. Miroi litolet hashniya. So now there's a job left to be our family head. Who should get it? Lo ani, shouldn't it come to me? Shani ben Yitzhar, Shusheni li Amram. I'm the oldest son of Yitzhar, who is the second son of Amram. So since Amram had 2 sons, they've already gotten their honor. I should be next. The Humana, but who did he appoint? Nasi as the leader of the family. At Ben Achiva Katan Mikulam, the youngest of the cousins, his cousin Elitzaphan ben Uziel. Based, of course, on Hashem is one who told him. Moshe didn't pick this out by himself. But Korach somehow got upset about it. I'm going to argue with him and I'm going to get rid of it, get rid of Moshe, and we're going to change what he has to say. Ma'asa, what did Korach do to bring about this to show where this controversy was going? Ahmad, he got up. He gathered 250 leading people, leaders of the Sanhedrin. They were jurists. Reuben Mishevet of Reuven Shchenav, and the majority of them came from the tribe of Reuven, who were his neighbors. Behaman, who are they? Elitzur ben Shteur v'chaverav u'kayotzebo, the leader of the tribe of Reuven, and those that followed after him. Shenemar, as it says in our pasuk, they were Nisi'ei Eidah. They were the princes of the congregation. Kriyei Moed. They were people who were known, and people knew who they were. Ulahalan, and similarly, when the Nesiim are appointed to the task of counting Am Yisrael, it also says Kriyei Haidah. Similarly, the same word of Kriyei Haidah, that these who are called by their name. These are people who are known in the congregation. So he took these 250 people, and he made for each of them a talent that was all made of blue threads, blue wool. Now we know that when we have a garment and we put on it in the corners, we put tzitzit, there is supposed to be one blue thread. So one thread on each of the four corners for the whole garment. Now he took a garment that was entirely tchelet, entirely made of blue wool. Baal and all of these 250 came Yamdu Lifnei Moshe, and they came before Moshe and they said the following. Amrullah, they asked him, Tali Chikulot Shel Tchelet, if I have a garment that's entirely tchelet, Chayevet B'tzitzit O Petura, is it obligated to have the four corners? If the whole purpose of this thread of tchelet is to remind me of the mitzvot, and I have a beged that's all tchelet, do I really need to have tzitzit or not? Amar Lahem, Moshe answered them, Chayevet. Doesn't matter what the garment's made of. You got to put tzitzit, because the garment, even if it's tchelet, the same color as that thread of the tzitzit, is not going to remind you of the mitzvot. You need the threads, you need the tzitzit on the corners of the garment to remind you of Hashem, the Torah, the mitzvot. That's what it's for. They started laughing, joking about it. If I have a talit that's entirely white, blue, orange, white, green, purple, whatever, all it needs is one thread of tchelet in each of the four corners. This garment that's all tchelet shouldn't automatically be patur, because the purpose is that the tchelet, the thread of tchelet, is what's going to remind you of the mitzvot. Moshe said, no, it doesn't work that way. So that's the end of Rashi. Now I'm going to go to Rashi's source, which is the Midrash Tanchuma, which elaborates on what Rashi's already spoken about, but we're going to give a little bit more. Again, Maikach Korach took. What is the chapter with which we ended last Shabbos readings? The mitzvah of tzitzit is the last thing we read in last Shabbos parsha. Kafatz Korach. Korach jumped up, v'amar l'Moshe. You told us that we need to put these threads, a tchelet thread, on each of the corners of this four-cornered garment. What if I have a talit shefut tchelet? If I have a garment, a four-cornered garment that's entirely made of blue wool, shouldn't it be patur from the tzitzit? Moshe said no. And Korach says that doesn't make sense. If it's all tchelet, it should fulfill its obligation. But by adding four more threads, it fulfills the obligation. And then Korach goes a step further, according to the Midrash Tanchuma, which Rashi doesn't bring down, but he says the following. What if I have a bayit malei sfarim? What if I have a room or a house that is full of Torah books? It's full of books of Torah. It should be patur. It shouldn't require a mezuzah on the doorpost. Again, what's the purpose of the mezuzah on the door? To remind us of Hashem when we enter and we exit. But if the room is full of sfarim, why should it require a mezuzah? It's my Torah library room shouldn't require a mezuzah. Amarle, Moshe answered, sorry, chayevet b'mezuzah. I still have to put a mezuzah there. Amarle, Korach again goes back and says, Kol Torah kula reish ayin chet parshio, sheyesh ba kulan. If I have a Torah in a room and it has all the parashot of the Torah, all 278 parashot of the Torah, ain't potro to the bayit, but they don't. That's not enough. I still need a mezuzah. But shtei parashot mezuzah potro to the bayit. But by putting two of those 278 parashot, on my doorpost, I fulfill the mitzvah mezuzah. Amar le. I don't believe that Hashem commanded you these mitzvot. You're making them up. You made up these mitzvot. This is why it says Vayikach Korach, that Korach took. Vayikach Korach ein Vayikach el lashon pliga. It's only a lashon of division. It's a language of dividing, like Unkla said. V'it plig. It's a dividing. It's creating controversy. That's what Korach is doing. And Korach created a controversy. Shelibo lakcho, because his heart took him to create a controversy. Kinyan shenemar, as it says in Iyov, what we just quoted, what is your heart going to cause you to do, and your eyes will lead you astray? What will they hint to you to do? Husha Moshe Amar Lahem. This is why Moshe later on, when he confronts them, says, Hama'at mikam, it's beneath you. Hashem has separated you from the rest of the congregation. He's speaking to Korach as a Levi. Kol oto inyan ad im kemot kol elu. This entire parsha is what happens as a result of Korach trying to create a controversy, is what the Midrash says. Now he goes further. Again, we're still in the Midrash Tanchuma here. Amr Chazal, sages said the following. Chacham gadol haya Korach. Korach was a very wise man. As a matter of fact, not only that, he was given the special privilege of carrying. He was one of those who was appointed to the task of carrying the Aron, the holiest of all of the items in the Mishkan. Shenemar, as we see, Livnei Kahat Lo Natan, the children of Kat were not given any of the wagons that we read about in Parshat Naso, Ki Avodat HaKodesh Aleim B'Kotef Yiso, because they had to carry things on their shoulders because they had the most holy things to carry. Korach ben Yitzhar is Kahat. He was from the family of Kahat. Okay. So now, again, what does Korach do? Korach miyad tziva v'asa 250 talitot tchelet. He made these garments of tchelet v'atfu bahem, and again the same thing that Rashi just quoted. And they all put on talit tchelet, and then they sat and made a party in these talit of the oral tchelet. Amad Korach Rasla Mishteh. He made a big party for all of these 250 people. V'atfu kulam b'talitot tchelet, and they all put on their tchelet garments. Ubal b'nei Aaron. Now, when you make a party, you have to have meat, right? So if you have meat, you have to have a karban shlamim. When you bring a karban shlamim, part of it has to go to the kohanim. So Aaron and the sons of Aaron came to take their portion of the karbanot. So they said, who told you that you could take these pieces of the karban? Lo Moshe, lo natan lachem klum, and they didn't give them. He said, you guys, may Moshe make this up so you guys would have, you would have a little meat to eat. I'm not giving you anything, he said. Moshe. They went and told Moshe. Halach Moshe lepaisan. Moshe went and tried to appease them, to make peace with them. Miyad amdu kenegdo. Immediately all 250 of them got up. Shenemar, and that's why it says vayakumu, and they arose because they were sitting at the meal eating. That's why it says when Moshe got there, they arose. Who again? Who are they? Even though here the Torah doesn't list the name of the rest of the people of who these 250 people were, Natan Simanehem. It gives us a hint to figure out who they are. And from different verses, you can understand who these people are. what do we compare this to? The Midrash says, Leben Tovim, there was a son who was okay, who was a son of good people, Shaya Gonev Kalim Mebeit HaMidrash. And he stole something. He stole something. So the person from whom the item was stolen didn't want to say who it was because didn't want to say who it was. He started describing him. Amrulo, they said to him, who stole your items? Amrulahem, Oto ben Tovim, Balkoma, this guy, he's a tall guy, you ain't nothing known, he's got beautiful eyes, Sarot Shor, he's got black hair, Chotmono, he's got a nice nose. Mishanatan Simanov, once he started describing him by his characteristics, Yadu Miu, they know who it was. The Afghan, and so too here. Even though the Torah here in our parsha does not give the names of the rest of the people, only the names of the four people that we listed in the first pasuk. But it told you who they were. They were Kriyei Eda Anshe Shem, Ata Yodei Amahem. You know who they are. The Nemar Lahalan, as it says earlier on, when they were appointed, the leaders were appointed. And then it says, and here it says, so it uses these three descriptive phrases to tell us who they were. And they congregated on Moshe and Aaron. So the Midrash adds firstly the half part about the Misfarim and the Mezuzot, and each of these cases, both the Chelet and the Sfarim, Korach seems to be taking a mitzvah, taking it to an absurd point to ridicule the mitzvah. But we have to understand that the mitzvah itself, both the mitzvah of tzitzit as well as the mitzvah of mezuzah, are both critical mitzvot to help us retain when we are going in and out, when we are out and about, our awareness of Hashem. And you have to have this level of awareness because of what we call lo plug. If I said, oh, well, if a room that has a Sefer Torah in it doesn't have it, then somebody will say, well, what if I only have half a Sefer Torah? And you'll start getting, people will start raising different issues. And the same thing with garments. You'll have different issues raised. And that's why the Torah says, no, it doesn't matter what the garment's made of. It doesn't matter what the room is filled with. It has to have mezuzah. It has to have the tzitzit. And that's the point Moshe is making, that these mitzvot are there because we need them to remind us constantly of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to keep us from going in the wrong direction. And Korach didn't want to understand that. Okay. That's a Canaan Balei HaTosfot. Okay. I'm quoting this because this is perhaps one of my favorite stories in the Midrash about this parsha. I'm a very big Mrs. On Ben Pellet fan, so we're going to talk about On Ben Pellet's wife just for a minute, and then we'll try to get back to some more about Korach. But Datzikanim quotes this very interesting medrash. It says, Amar Rav. Rav tells us the following, that On Ben Pellet, again, we mentioned at the beginning of the first pasuk, there were four people mentioned. We have Korach, we have Datan and Aviram, and we have On Ben Pellet. Now, On Ben Pellet is mentioned in the first pasuk, and then he disappears completely from the narrative. Korach is there throughout the narrative until the punishment is meted out. Datan and Aviram are there when the punishment is meted out. On Ben Pellet disappears entirely from the narrative. And that's why the Medrash says the following. Rav says the following. On Ben Pellet, On the son of Pellet, Ishto Hitzilata. His wife was the one who saved him. Amrle, he comes home, says, dear, guess what? I've joined Korach's rebellion. She says to him, my nafkalach mino, what do you mean you joined the rebellion? What difference does it make to you? Moshe Rabba atal midah, Korach Rabba atal midah. If Moshe is the Rebbe, you're still going to be a student. And if Korach's the leader, you're still going to be a student. Why are you getting yourself involved in this? She says to him. Amar Allah, so he says to her, yeah, but I got a problem with my of it. I already swore my allegiance to the rebellion here. What am I going to do now? Amrle, Yadana Kula Kadishta Kadishta. I know, she says to him, I know that everybody is holy. I have an Eitzah, it's going to be based. I know that everybody is so holy that I have a way to solve your problem. Tuv bebeitcha, go sit in the tent, go sit home, stay home. Just stay in bed. And I'll save you. How did she save him? Ishkita chamra. First, she gave him a good drink of wine. And so she made sure he would stay home. She got him good and drunk, so he would stay and he would forget where he was, and he'd stay home. Yatva Ababa. So she sat by the door. So in case, hey, they would call him, hey, the rebellion's starting. Come on, wake up. Time to come. She sat by the door of Sa'ara, and she disheveled her hair or uncovered her hair or did something to her hair that made it immodest. Called the Ata, whoever walked by it, all the people from the rebellion who walked by to call him, she saw that her hair was uncovered. The Choser and immediately turned away and didn't want to get involved. Something's going on here. Till things passed by, Nivlu, they were punished. The whole thing happened. The whole rebellion happened, was quashed. Everything went on. V'hu and he was saved. The Kaiminon benafsho chachmot nashim banta beta. And she is the one who fulfills the verse that we have in Mishlei, the wisdom of women build her house. However, the rest of that pasuk is the ivelet biyadeh teharsena. The foolish woman destroys it with her own hands. And now the midrash continues. The midrash that the Kedim B'das is quoting continues. Zu ishto shel Korach. Who is the woman who destroys her house with her hands? This is Korach's wife. Shechaziko yad bala b'machloket. She is the one who strengthened him, who egged him on, the midrash says. The Amrale, and she said to him, Chazi my Avid Moshe. Look what Moshe, your cousin Moshe, is doing to Ihu Havimalka. He appoints himself the king. Achva Shavi Kahana. He appoints his brother to be the Kohen Rabbah, to be the Kohen Gadol. Livnei Achuha, to his sons, to his nephews. Shavinu Sigane Kuna. He makes them the assistant Kohanim. If you have to give truma from your crop, Kohen, he gives it to the Kohen. Bikurim, you get your first fruits. Who do you have to give it to? The Kohen. Maser Rishon. Now, Maser Rishon, she says, okay, yeah, Moshe was good to you guys also. He gave you Maser Rishon, to you, the Levium. Nami, however, even when you collect your Maser, which he gave you as a kind of like she says, well, okay, he gave you a consolation gift. He gave you Maser, but still you have to give 1/10 of the Maser. You have to give to the Kohen. And not only did he do all this, he took all the wealth from Am Yisrael and gave it to the Kohanim. Not only that, she says to him, Guy is the chulam izaychu. He cut off all your hair, made you guys look funny. Made by all the Levim had to cut off all their hair. They had to shave all of their hair. And then not only did he shave you all, so you look, like ripe pea, ripe fruit, whatever. That he picked you up like a basket. That Aaron is to pick up each of the Levium and wave them around like a basket of fruit, she says. But Korach says to him, wait a minute, he himself shaved himself, and he also was picked up by his brother. What do you mean? She says, Amrale Ihu Kivin de Rabba, he doesn't care. He's the king. What does he care if he gets embarrassed by one? As long as he can embarrass you. He wanted just to embarrass you. He said, well, okay, if I don't do it too, you guys won't join in. So he did it too, but he doesn't care because he's the king. But you guys now, you all look ridiculous. He made you all look ridiculous. And this is what he said. And he also tells you put tchelet on your garments, at these tzitzit with tchelet. And if he thinks that tchelet is so important, take a garment, the chelta of tchelet, and go wear it to all the people in your gathering. And therefore the Midrash says, Nismacha parshat tzitzit lekan. That's why the parshat tzitzit is juxtaposed to the parshat of Korach. Lomar lachosh al yidei tchelet, through the mitzvah tchelet huchzak hamachloket. The machloket was strengthened. Ki bi'ota sha'ah. And that time, then Korach is, and I'll get he quotes the rest of this midrash. Okay, he made this party for all 250 people. They were all wearing their tefillahs, and he calls Moshe, and he asks Moshe, are these putter or not? He says, no, they're chayiv, and he says, how can that be? And same thing with the Sfarim and the mezuzot, and he quotes the rest of this. Okay, and finally he ends with, you're making this stuff up, that he tells Moshe. So we see again that very, very powerful lesson. Be wary, make sure you pick a good wife, because she'll lead you in the right path. Don't pick a wife that's going to lead you astray. And we see the Medrash really making this lesson here by, I don't know that it's exaggerating, but it's clearly blaming Korach's wife for being the one who stokes the fire of his passion, and Onan Pellet's wife, the one who kind of, makes sure he doesn't get involved. Okay? So I just wanted to quote that because, as I said, Onan Pellet's wife, that's one of my, I really enjoy. I think that's a very powerful medrash, and I think it's a very important lesson that we need to be aware of, especially when we're talking to our children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren who might be of marriageable age, that they need to not just say, oh, she's good looking or she's rich or whatever, but be looking at what type of midot they have and what type of relationship they want to have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That should be an important part of whatever you're going through and any shikul you're going through. Okay, Klei Yakar. Klei Yakar starts with the following. Again, now we're back to Vayikach Korach. Okay, we've left Omen Pellet behind, we're back to Korach. V'kichazu. This word by Yikach, Ba'u Harbe Perushim. Okay, there are many different interpretations. Yan kilo parash in kicha biyadayim o bidvarim. We don't know whether this is he took something physically with his hands or he took something by speaking to somebody and convincing them to follow a specific course. Kimo kachet halviyim, as we find that Moshe is told by Hashem, take the Leviyim. Again, he doesn't mean take them physically. There it means take them through words. Whereas other times in the Torah, we have to take something, obviously means to take it with your hand. The Yesh Omer, and there are those that say, Shekol HaSipur Nimshach, all of the story continues ad B'nei Reuven, until this whole thing is of the taking is the first verse until we finish B'nei Reuven, the first end of the first verse. Shalakach lo, that what does it mean Korach took? Who is the Korach? Who is the answer of who Korach took? Shalakach lo lamach lakuto at B'nei Reuven. He took the children of Reuven. So in other words, Korach takes Datan and Aviram and Onan Pellet. He raw lelakate a love komari nefesh, because he saw that it would be a wise idea, or he felt it would be a good idea to collect all those that have complaints against Moshe, all those who were bitter in their soul, literally. The Yedan, he knew that all of the tribe of Reuven was bitter al b'chorash and Yilkachabi Reuven, because Reuven, even though Reuven is the oldest of Yaakov's sons, he has lost the birthright. He is no longer has the privilege of the firstborn. So his whole tribe is kind of ripe for complaining, fetching. The Alpha, and even though Yaakov says Yaakov Natola v'lo Moshe, Yaakov's the one who took the Bechorah from Reuven, not Moshe. Mikol Makom, however, they felt, and Korach feels that all of the tribe of Reuven would feel al Yedei shetafsar kol shvarol aleha, since ultimately anybody who has a position of authority will ultimately regain it. They would have thought, even though Yaakov took it away, it was not meant to be a permanent removal, only a temporary removal. And they would agree to join Korach, which seems, of course, a very, very strange thought, for the very simple reason that Korach wants to be the Kohen, and they all want to be the Kohen. There can only be one Kohen Gadol, so it seems very strange that he would get other people who wanted to be Kohen Gadol to join his rebellion. But anyway, that's what the Klei Yakar wants to suggest. V'yesh Omer, and there are others who want to say, what is Shalach Vayikach? Shalakach lo l'ta'ana, he took with him to complain at Ben Yitzhar, the son of Yitzhar. Kizot haita ikar ta'anato, his primary complaint, as Rashi said, what was his primary complaint? Was that he wanted to be appointed the head of the family. Since Moshe and Aaron couldn't fill that job because they had, quote, national roles, he wanted the local role. He wanted at least the family role rather than somebody who was his younger cousin. His primary focus was the fact that Moshe had appointed his younger cousin as the head of the family. So who would he take with him? He would take his brothers with him, the other children of Yitzhar, who felt slighted by the fact that the son of Uziel was appointed as the head of the family. Like Rashi explained. The Yesh Omrim, so that's another possibility, he says, is that he took Vayikach Korach Ben Yitzhar. He took Ben Yitzhar, the sons of Yitzhar, Ben Kat Ben Levi, the other sons of Yitzhar. Okay, that's who he took with him. The Yesh Omrim, however, others say that Vav Shel Vidatan Nosefet Kivav Shel Va'aya Va'ana. We have psukim in the Torah where there's an extra Vav that doesn't necessarily belong. And Ubiaro, that what does it mean? Shalokach et Datan va'Aviram l'tzar from Elav, that he took Datan and Aviram to join him. So it doesn't mean that Korach and Datan and Aviram took. It means that Korach took Datan and Aviram and Omed Pelet. And that would fit with the fact that the verb is in the singular of Vayikach, that he's the one who's doing the taking, would work very well with that interpretation that the Vav of Datan and Aviram is an extra Vav, so that really it's Korach doing the taking, and he's taking Datan and Aviram. The Nachon Lomar, and it's possible to say Shetarvayu no, that both of these previous ones that we said are correct. Shalachach lo Latana. First, he took Mashu ben Yitzhar, whoever was the son of Yitzhar. The Lakachlo Gamit Datan v'Aviram. The only took Datan and Aviram and own Lefizeh lo tiyavav nosefet. And that's why they're according to that the vav is not even extra because he took the sons of Yitzhar and Datan and Aviram and own. So we have the and works. Okay, and then he quotes the Midrash that he took the different things of Tchelet and the Tzitzit, but Kleakar says, I don't understand. Mezuzah mantachar shemei. Where does the Midrash? We understand where the Midrash got the idea that he took these garments of all tchelet because it's right next to the parshat tzitzit. But where did we get the concept that they took that he brought mezuzah? And he wants to say, where does the medrash about the mezuzah come? The nearly it appears to me the mapik law that it comes from the source for the Midrash of being about mezuzah is midichtiv, because at the end it says when Moshe goes out to talk to Datan and Aviram, it says Datan and Aviram yatsu nitzavim. They went out, they came out and stood petach ahalehem at the tent, at the entrance to their tents. Lamalei lemichta petach ahalehem. Why did it say that they walked out of the gate of the entrance to their tent? Ela sheyatsu nitzavim. They went out and stood proud to blaspheme al hamezuzah shebepetach alehem, to complain and disregard the mezuzah which was at the entrance to their tents. So therefore, what he's saying is Korach is the one who complained about the tzitzit. However, Datan and Aviram hosifu ol lachlok al mitzvat mezuzah shebepetach ha'oel. Because both of them said Moshe badami libo shtei mitzvot elu, that Moshe made up these two mitzvot on his own. This was part and parcel of their argument. Like Rabbeinu Bachai wrote, Ki amru, because they said just like if I have a garment that's all tchelet, and it's the tchelet thread that is the one that reminds me of Hashem, so it should be patur from tzitzit if it's all tchelet. And similarly, bayit malei svarim patur from mezuzah. Bayit is full of svarim that remind me of Hashem should be patur from mezuzah. Kach. Now further, wait. Kleakars goes one step further. What they were alluding to really was the following that they wanted to complain about. Kach bisman shekolo edat kedoshim. If the entire congregation is holy and they're all on a very high spiritual level, einam tzarichem lamanhig. So we don't need a leader anymore, Moshe. We don't need you anymore. That's what they were really saying. What they were really saying wasn't that they were arguing about Tchelet or they were arguing about Mezuzah. They were really alluding to the fact that, hey, Moshe, we're all holy. We don't need you to show us how to be holy. We don't need you to be a leader. The Od Ramuz Bezeh Lomar Sheikar Tam Shtei Mitzvot Ha'eleh. Also, these two mitzvot are the hint that these two mitzvot, mitzvot Hashem, these are to remind us, both these remind us of Hashem. As we say, when we see the tzitzit, we remember all the mitzvot. And similarly, when we think about the mezuzah and its place in our role in our everyday, we should remember Hashem when we enter and when we exit. If the whole congregation is holy, we don't need anything to remind us. We're all holy. We always think about Hashem. The only people who need tzitzit and mezuzah, to those who don't always remember God, who forget God and don't really care about God. But people who are God-fearing, they don't need these two mitzvot. Because this was their whole argument, they were punished, vitapam, and their children. And we should consider if he and the people, the men, sin, why were the children punished? They argued about the mitzvah of tzitzit. They debated and disputed the fact that these two mitzvahs were God-given. And we learn in Perek Bamalik, and the Gemara in Shabbos teaches us, Rabbi Yehuda Rav Meir, Chad Amar, one said, Banim meitim babon tzitzit. One of them said that when we fail to observe and we disregard and we belittle the mitzvah of tzitzit, our children chas v'shalom will die. The other one says no, that it's because of when we degrade and we don't have mezuzot and we don't care about the mitzvah of mezuzah, that's when our children would die. The tam lishneim, and the reason for both of these, one is because they both come as a remembrance. As we said, that the tzitzit are to remind us of the mitzvot, and the mezuzah is to remind us of the presence of Hashem whenever we enter and exit our house and any room. Uktiv, Vatishkach Torah Elokecha, one who forgets the Torah of Hashem, Eshkach Banecha Gamani, I will forget their children also. Ki al yedei shetishkach toldot hamaasim hatovim, because we forget that if our children don't see us doing mitzvot and maasim tovim, they will forget them. Eshkach gam stam toldotecha, I will also forget. If we forget to keep the mitzvot, Hashem will forget our generations, because our generations are the mitzvot, the ode. And similarly, shapanim anaf nimenu, our children are our leaves of our branches. Kamo tzitzit, shem anaf mina beged, the tzitzit which are at the corner of the beged. So I think the Medrash is trying to tell us that Korach, while Korach, if we look at what he says, I'm a populist, the whole congregation is holy. We want to do what's right for the congregation. We don't want you, Moshe, making up these mitzvot on your own. But in reality, he was really arguing against Moshe and against his leadership. And as such, he's arguing on Hashem's appointment of Moshe, and he is denying the role of Hashem in Am Yisrael and in the giving of the Torah, and that's why ultimately he and all of his followers are punished. And the power of the lessons that we really have to understand is that all too often we may not understand the rationale for all the mitzvot. They may not seem logical to us, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu has told us that we have to follow these mitzvot. These are the mitzvot that we were given. We were given through Moshe because Moshe had a level of relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we can't understand, we can't fathom, we can't reach, and we have to rely on Moshe as our prophet who teaches us the Torah. And when we deny that Moshe's the true prophet and we deny the Torah, then we are in reality we are denying HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore we have no future. So we have to understand that if we want to continue and move forward, the key to moving forward for us, for our children, for our grandchildren, for whatever, is remembering and that we have an obligation to follow the rules of the mitzvah, rules of the Torah, learn them so we understand them to the extent we're able to understand them. And if we don't understand why we've given them, we have to accept them anyway. And when we do that, we assure that Kadosh Baruch Hu will bless us, bless our children, and bless our posterity. And we hope and pray that Hashem should bless all of Am Yisrael, and we should have true peace in the near future, and we should be so into Gula Shlem Meher Yameinu. Thank you all. I open up for questions, comments, and feedback at this point in time. Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, no? All right, have a good rest of the week. Chodesh Tov. And Bez Hashem, I hope this week things will be back to normal. Bezrat Hashem, we'll see you all in Shul. And see you next week, Bezrat Hashem. Laila Tov to all and Chodesh Tov.